London podcast. My name is Adam. You'll refer to me as he, him, and I will be your host today, talking all about producers, production, and indie dev. And today, joining me as my guest is Kiva. Kiva, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Kiva, and I am a publishing producer at Chucklefish, and pronouns are she, her, and I'm here to talk to Adam.
We were just discussing the fact that talking in 2021 is still as weird as it was talking in 2020. But I can imagine that talking to people, production and producing individuals has just been a whole method thing. But let's start by chatting about. So you are a publishing producer at Chucklefish. What does that sort of entail? What's your sort of day to day looking like? We'll say at the minute as opposed to as it was.
Yeah. Well, what's kind of lucky is that I was always a remote producer anyway. So it wasn't the biggest jump for me, but I have lost like all my social skills because of because of not seeing people.
Yep, that's fair.
But yeah, like the role kind of involves supporting the developers that we're publishing.
Mhm.
Um a lot of my experience lies in helping developers like achieve their goals, get themselves like organized, and kind of manage like communication, budget, scheduling, and any kind of external partners they have as well. I think we all know that indies kind of have a lot on their plate. So if someone can be there to manage things like localization or QA or talking to investors or publishers or anyone external, that's always something that a lot of indie devs are grateful to have so they can just work on the game. So
I
yeah.
know that I would be grateful for that, and so yes, that sounds awesome. So what's interesting is obviously the fact. So you sort of before the sort of the role in the sort of the publishing side of production, you've also been more of a general producer as well. So what sort of taking from where you are in sort of publishing and stuff, what kind of skills would a producer? I mean, obviously the skills you've got in publishing directly help. But what sort of skills as a producer do you think sort of go across all sort of production roles, sort of whether you are indie dev producer or publishing producer or any kind of sort of producer?
Yeah, I'd say the producer on any project definitely needs to be the organized person, the person that can kind of communicate and bring up the issues that aren't necessarily easy to bring up. A lot of people in dev teams maybe really like to. Of course, everyone should look at things on the positive side, but sometimes people like to exaggerate that things aren't taking as long as maybe they really are and things like that. And a producer can kind of get the realistic take on like what like a dev team's kind of doing, and having the skills to kind of uh you know confront and communicate that within a dev team is really beneficial. Trying to think of what else I'm meant to be good at.
I mean, you kind of typified it there. It's the sort of the personification of oversight. You know, people kind of can get that very blinkered approach where they just run along and don't think about the bigger picture and stuff. And that's your remit, isn't it? To be always having the bigger picture in mind, to be sort of thinking about what's
Yeah.
coming next. How do I keep people on track?
Definitely, yeah. You just be the person with the bird's eye view on the project. It always helps to have someone that's just kind of standing on like the sidelines and really seeing like what's going on behind all of it. So
Absolutely, and it's
yeah.
interesting. It's interesting to think about. So my company, Jester, we have worked with you in the past, and it was interesting working when we had you working and having someone who was kind of like, you see this thing that's coming up in like a couple of weeks, and we're like, no. And the difference between, it's very easy, especially if you are trying to manage a project while also working on the project at the same time, to just lose track of
Mhm.
other people working on it, what you've got coming up, all this kind of thing, and certainly having somebody there who can be sort of that objective view of keeping an eye on things is super important. And this sort of brings me on to it sort of brings me to the first question, obviously talking about that. When we're talking about where you are now, it's interesting to think about, because did you always start as a producer? Where did you sort of start when you first came, sort of got into game? Did you come in via games straight into production, or did you come in a different route?
I kind of did come in straight out of production. Whenever I left university, I studied game design at university, and I kind of wanted to be a 2D artist at that point because I didn't really know that a producer existed. But throughout my like group projects and even in the application process to Transfuser, I had actually already been doing that role because I just thought, someone needs to kind of keep things on track. And I didn't know it was a real job.
Yep.
Until one of my lecturers was like, "Oh, like, do you know what a producer is? That's kind of what you're doing, and you should look into it." Um, so yeah, I applied for a competition called Transfuser, where me and you met.
Yeah, I
Um,
was just thinking that, and I'm sorry to drop this. That was 4.5 years ago. Just
Yeah,
as
I
a
know.
slight side
We're
bomb.
not babies anymore
Oh
because
no.
veterans are supposed to be in the industry for 5 years
Oh, don't
and
tell me
we're
that.
almost veterans. Yeah. Which makes me feel like I should be like in my 50s.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. It's hard to hear veteran and be like, please
yeah.
no, don't give me that tag.
Yeah, exactly. Just the games industry's got to change.
Yeah.
Veterans, like veterans need to be around for a lot longer. I don't feel like I have any right to tell people how to do anything yet. So,
Well,
so I don't feel like a veteran.
it's interesting that you say that, and especially when you refer to, because the role of production, and like you said, like it's weird to think of yourself as a veteran after 5 years, but especially the thing you said there about you hadn't even heard of producer as a role is something that I've actually found consistent across the games industry. For example,
Oh,
I did not know that production was a role. I went to a roundtable, oh god, about 2 years ago, I think now, with some producers from the games industry, so people like Des Scale and stuff like that, who talked about what it is to be a producer, and that made it very clear to me the fact there is this entire field of project management and coordination and organization, all that kind of thing, which obviously you think of you go, oh, every project needs that. And then you go, wait a minute, of course there's got to be a role for someone doing that. And similarly for Ahmed, one of the other sort of Game Dev London hosts, he was moving from another industry where he was doing those kind of things, project management, coordination, trying to think ahead, and didn't really realize that those were transferable skills to move into the games industry with until I pointed out to him, as like, oh, there's this role. And he's like, oh yeah, okay, that's amazing.
yeah.
So it's definitely, is that something that you found when speaking to people that, especially in indie dev teams, that kind of thing, that they don't really realize not only that the importance of production as a role, but that production is a role to start with?
Absolutely. And that's very much the rule that whenever we were getting started, like a lot of indie teams kind of think we're such a small team, we don't need someone to keep us organized. We can kind of be accountable to ourselves. And that's a very easy thing to say, but it's so hard to do because you'll meet many indie teams that kind of encounter a lot of problems that wouldn't exist if they had a producer to kind of help. Whenever we were starting, I was very much organizing because I was anxious about not achieving our goals because we were really ambitious in the competition.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, that I very much defined like being a 2D artist as my primary role and producer as a secondary role. But I was definitely doing far more production work. It's just one of those like things where uh it can you realize how important the role is and how much a team can really benefit from it as soon as they have access to someone that wants to do that for them.
Absolutely. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did you get the funding from the transfer the year that you did? You did, didn't you?
We did,
Yeah,
yeah. It
absolutely.
was so unexpected. We like
Because
fumbled through and managed to get the funding.
but this is where it gets interesting, because of the fact, so because as you sort of mentioned, we did the same year as you did, and we didn't get the funding. But actually, when I reflect on it over the years and that kind of thing, one of the key things for us is that we went down the route of being, we were a team of programmers, and we went down the route of building a game that was complicated. But when it came to showcasing it, our game had bugs and things in it that really put off some of the judges. Things that had we had some kind of had we had someone on the team who was organized as opposed to a bunch 4 people who weren't, we might have seen ahead. Someone would have pointed out ahead of time, like, guys, if you keep going down the route of building this game to be, as big and as massive as it is, it's not going to work as well as you need it to at the end of it. And actually, perhaps one of the differences is the fact that because you had that mindset going into it, and you were already thinking about, how do we coordinate, how do we keep it going, how do we get it so that when we do showcase it, it's something that's going to impress the judges and do well. And that is a very clear distinction between us as 2 teams. And actually, when it comes down to indie devs who are successful and ones that come, or even more than that, ones that are, what's the word here, sort of able to sort of produce content and be able to, get a game to release and showcase something, or have demos available, and things that, don't break when someone presses the spacebar and things like that.
Yeah.
Actually, the importance of organization and coordination, and just having somebody who, even if they're not calling themselves the producer, so someone who has that producer mindset is invaluable, really. And I got all of you as well. You'll hope if you like what we've been doing here, you can come find out more about us by going to gamedev.london, where you can find out all about this episode and all our past episodes, as well as our game jams, and join us in our Discord as well. Otherwise, we'll see you this time next week for another episode of the Game Dev London podcast. See you later.